The Empower Hour series was created for all of the women out there who have done everything they were supposed to do in life and are struggling to discover what's next. I see you. You know there's so much more out there, but you just don't know how to align with what's next for you. Well, you're not going to struggle anymore. It's time for you to create your new path and fall in love with your life over and over again. See that badass woman over there who has discovered what's next for her? Let's go ask her to share how she did it and become inspired. And if she can discover what's next, so can you. Hi, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Empower Hour series. I am your host, Suzanne Orlando, and today we have an amazing guest, Jessica Lorion. She is an actor and the host of an incredible podcast called Mamas in Training. And Jessica's whole journey is all about turning her mess into her message. And I cannot wait for her to share all of her journey, where she's been and where she's going. Jessica, thank you so much for being here today. I'm so excited to have you on. I know we've talked for a couple of, it seems like a long time we've been talking to get you on this show. And I'm so excited and grateful that you're here with us.
Same. Thank you. I'm so excited to be here, Suzanne. And I just want to thank you for the space that you're creating, both in Clubhouse, that wonderful app, and then
Yes.
here on YouTube. It's just, empowering women is what I'm all about right now with what I'm trying to create for the podcast. And so it was kind of kismet, I think, that we met and we could do this together. So I'm really grateful to be here.
I absolutely agree. So why don't you start with the beginning, maybe I always like people to talk about a little bit about what they do outside of the passion that they poured into, and also talk about the birth point of when you started your podcast as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So, primarily, I'm an actor. I'm originally from Massachusetts, but I live in Astoria, New York. And it was crazy. I pretty much went to school for musical theater. My parents said, okay, if you'd like for graduation, we can go on a trip to Italy. And I was like, nah, I just want to go to New York City.
I
like,
love it.
I look back and I'm like,
You
what
say
the
it's stupid,
heck was...
but at the time it felt good, right?
Well, yeah. And I mean, truly, that's where I wanted to be and what I wanted to do. So it was all meant to be. So I moved to New York City 2008. And I just, hit the ground running with auditions, as they say, as an actor. And I pretty much, I was on the national tour of Beauty and the Beast. So I was traveling the country for 2.5 years, pretty homeless, but living an unbelievably luxurious life. It was truly amazing, especially in my 20s, just having the
Oh,
time of
I'm
my life.
sure.
Ugh.
Yeah.
And then after I finished that, I was doing a bunch of other regional work, traveling all over to work for 3 months or 6 months at a time, or 1 month sometimes. And, as an actor, you're kind of always looking for different ways to be creative. And
Mm-hmm.
our careers ebb and flow, just like the
Yeah.
big celebrities that you
Yep.
know, Jessica Alba, for example, her company Honest just went public. Well, Jessica Alba doesn't make her full career off of being an actor
That's
and
right.
being a celebrity in that aspect. She has her other passions. So
Yep.
I was kind of in this sort of lull. The auditions were a little bit slow, and I was feeling like I needed something that I really felt like I had control over,
Okay.
especially creatively. Because also sometimes as an actor, you don't necessarily feel like you have all that much control, because you put your best work out there and you can
Yep.
work on your craft, and then you just sort of wait for people to give you the job or not.
Right. And a lot of
So
process, I imagine, through acting too, is that, putting yourself out there and not going on the audition process, not getting the role, getting the constructive criticism, and but having the momentum to keep going.
yeah, or not getting any constructive criticism and just being like, okay, I guess
I
I
don't know
didn't get that
why.
one.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Or not even ever knowing, or yeah, that whole thing is a different interview.
Yes.
It's
Completely.
crazy. But I think the part of that is like actors, creatives, we have this entrepreneurial kind of mindset.
Mhm.
And so I was looking for something creative. And at the time, all of my girlfriends were starting to have kids. And so I felt like I was inundated in the best way with just babies and the mother conversation, but I wasn't able to take part in it because I didn't know anything.
Right.
And I was visiting one of my best friends, and she was talking about how when she was pumping or breastfeeding, she felt really lonely because she'd have to go, hide in the guest room and
Hmm.
pump, or, you know, miss out on some family things or whatever.
Yeah.
And she just kind of felt lonely. So I thought, well, what if I started to interview moms about their journey into motherhood? And then I could offer it in a podcast to people who were currently pumping or breastfeeding. And those women could listen and then have something to listen to and not feel so alone. So that
Brilliant.
was the birth of my original podcast about a year and a half ago. And that was called the Pumping Podcast.
Yeah.
And throughout this whole time as well, so when I was on tour, that national tour, I actually ended up getting diagnosed first with psoriasis
Okay.
and then arthritis. And so
Oh,
the
wow.
full diagnosis was psoriatic arthritis.
Okay.
And it got so bad that I literally couldn't walk. My
Oh my
husband,
gosh.
yeah, my husband came to visit me when I was performing in LA, and I had to buy a cane. He had to pick me up and carry me to the bathroom to brush my teeth. Like
Oh my goodness.
it was awful. Yeah.
Really debilitating beyond.
Completely. Yeah. And I had never had anything like this in my life. My skin was always perfectly clear. And then I went to literally looking like a monster, like covered head to
Wow.
toe, looking
Wow.
crazy. So, anyway, I could get into more of that later. But the long story made short about that is I got put on medication.
Okay.
And the medication that I got put on, which luckily because of the medication, and then also I've really been focused on kind of a clean diet and healthy eating and that sort of thing, I've been able to regulate it. So right now my skin looks really nice and clear.
Yep.
What it's like, I guess 5 or 6 years after all of that. But that means I can't have kids of my own until I'm off of this medication.
Okay. Okay.
So the combination of needing this sort of creative outlet and then myself sort of feeling like I mean, I would have probably become a mom 10 years ago if I could have,
Yeah.
and it financially was in the right place and everything, but it just wasn't in the cards for me. So I thought, well, how can I sort of, like you said, turn my mess into my message and
Yeah.
put something positive out? So I did that with the podcast, and it's been out for about a year and a half. And then just about a month ago, I relaunched with a whole new rebrand and an idea of it to really embrace my story about my autoimmune disease and
Hmm.
embrace this idea of myself as a mama in training, because
Yeah.
I discovered after doing 70 odd interviews that I was learning so much.
Yep.
And I was like, we study everything else, right, in life, but so rarely do we actually study how to be a mom
Right.
and pregnancy and all of that leading up to it. So anyway, that's the super long answer, but that's what's kind of been my new mission. So my relaunch of the new podcast, or new concept now, is it's called Mamas in Training, and you can still go back and listen to all of the 60 some odd episodes of the Pumping Podcast,
Good.
but now I have new episodes. So I interview moms who've been there,
Hmm.
who want to tell aspiring moms or pregnant women kind of what they wish they had known, so that we can all learn how to
Yeah.
be a mom.
That's great. I remember it wasn't too long ago when that launched, and we had
Yeah.
that awesome clubhouse party
Yeah. Thank
where
you
we
for the
celebrated the
support.
launch of that. That was so amazing. And that the concept behind the podcast is so amazing. I love the pumping podcast, the premise behind that as
Yeah.
well, being, being when I had my kids, I breastfed, and there were times where when I went back to work, I had to go and isolate myself, and
Yeah.
or like you said, pull away from social functions or whatever, and just be isolated. So to have had the access to something like that would probably have been a real game changer for my mindset during that time. So I love that you took that concept that your friend was sharing that they were struggling with, and you created something to help others. You said initially, like you love your thing, you love to empower other women, and how that is like kind of like the framework for that
Totally.
podcast. And now taking your own journey and everything that you've endured and continue to endure, and saying, I see my friends, I see people with children, but there probably are so many questions that come up. I want to be the best version of mom when I am able to be mom. And I want to start working on that now. And the concept of we work and we train and we get educated in so many other facets in our life. I always say to people, there's no manual for being a parent. You're just supposed to do it. A lot of times, like, you're in the hospital and this baby, and you're like, I'm supposed to take this thing home with me now, and I know what to do. And, so I think the real life stories from people to help get us in that framework and know that we're not alone. And a lot of the things that probably are shared on your podcast is such an empowering, it's amazing work, and so empowering that you're able to do that. So I appreciate that.
Yeah. I mean, I find, of course we can go pick up the What to Expect book,
Of course.
but I think there's something to be said for that sort of feedback and advice that's given from people who've lived it completely,
Oh yeah.
And the other thing that I just will share too is I can't speak in terms of somebody who has been trying to get pregnant and who has gone through that struggle, because I know that there are women out there who even the thought of trying to learn or study this when they've gone through, trauma like that is beyond what's comfortable for them. And I want to honor that and know that, we're coming at this from two different sides. However, I do think that if it was more common for women to start whenever they think they might want to embark on that journey, if they were to start to just learn and have that sort of feedback and knowledge before they even started trying, might find that if they do struggle to actually get pregnant eventually, that the blow might not be so hard, Also, 'cause I've heard, I would say 95% of my guests have had loss.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Me too. Yeah.
Right. And just me hearing that now, once again, I don't know because I haven't been there. So this is me assuming, but I would hope that I would be a little bit more prepared. Like when I am off of my medication and I am healthy and I am putting this all out into the world, manifesting.
Of course, always do it. Always manifest.
And, and that's all happening. I'm not going to expect to get pregnant right away. I mean, if that happens and it comes to full term and we have amazing, but I'm already going into that with sort of that lowered expectation. So, I want to honor those people who are going through that because I know that it's not easy, but also I think we sort of as a community of women need to sort of shift the narrative and the focus around it a little.
I agree. I appreciate you saying that too. Because there are people out there who are in that space.
Yeah.
And I like how you shared that, and you recognize them and honored them here. And I'm sure, and all across the board, you're such an authentic person that I'm sure that is something that often you speak about, which is extremely important, right? So I appreciate you sharing that for sure. What I have a question in terms of starting a podcast and starting, having this amazing idea in this podcast. And was there any, even when you had the thought in your head? So oftentimes what I hear from women is they get these really awesome ideas in their head, or they get these these feelings or these validations, or they have these intentions that they want to put forth, and they have this great idea. Oh my gosh, I want to do this. This is great. This feels like me. This validation keeps coming up. This feels good when I'm in this space. What can I do with it? And then what usually happens is, I call it like within like 3 seconds of having an amazing idea, we find a million reasons why we shouldn't do it. We beat ourselves up. No, you can't ever do that. What are people going to think of you? You don't know what you're doing. So if you struggled with any of that when you had these ideas, well, I guess the first question is, did you have any moments like that where you had this incredible idea for this really unique style of podcast to get some information out there? Did you bump up into any of your own personal obstacles before you were able to get into action towards it?
Well, I mean, first of all, of course I did, because I was trying to do something on a topic that I have no knowledge of and
Right.
no experience of. And so initially, yeah, I was thinking like, people are just going to look at me and be like, who are you? You're an ignorant, like single girl who hasn't
Yep.
even tried to get pregnant yet. You haven't gone through any, like, who are you? I'm not going to listen to an episode of you talking about telling me what to do. And so yeah, of course. But I've found that as I've as I've been more forthcoming, I think, with my story, and I've been more forthcoming with, I mean, I think probably in almost every episode I say like, I'm ignorant, I don't know. So as I do more of that, I think, people respect that I'm doing this beforehand. And that's what I hear
Mhm.
more often. Um, and I think that in more of a like detailed conceptual type answer to that question
Yeah.
too, like just getting a podcast up and going. um I mean, I didn't know even really what a podcast was. I had just sort of started to listen to them, and
Mhm.
that term is kind of more used now, but a couple of years ago it really wasn't. So I think I was a little bit more comforted in the fact, because I was at the time working with two people who had started their own podcasts.
Okay.
One specifically who had had a pretty decent success with it. And so I was a little bit more on the edge of like, well, if they can do it, I'm like, I can do it.
Love that.
And I just
Yes.
kind of kept thinking to myself, like, knowing that what I had was something and that it had to be out there. And now looking at what I have with this rebrand of Mamas in Training, I'm trying to reach out to press and everything to get this word out there so that more women can hear this. Because my thing is like, yeah, there are pregnancy podcasts, there
Yep.
are birthing podcasts, there are women podcasts, but there's no one coming from the story that I'm coming from and
That's
telling the
right.
story that I'm telling. And I think that's something that women have to remember a lot too, is like, there's Oprah and
Yep.
there's Ellen,
Yep.
they both do the same job, but
They
they
do.
do it very differently, and they serve people differently and different people. Like I watch
Yep.
Oprah and I watch Ellen, but I watch them for different reasons. And
That's
so
right.
there's, when I sort of remind myself, when I hate that word of imposter syndrome and all that.
Yes.
I hate it.
It's a very timely word right now, phrase.
Exactly. But like when that is kind of coming up, I just sort of remind myself that no one has the experience in the story that you have. And so
That's
that
right.
sort of help pushes me through a little bit.
That's so important because there are so many. I was having this conversation with somebody the other day, connected to Clubhouse in a sense. This is somebody who is looking to, they're a professional in what they do, but they want to do something different. And they said, I'm thinking coaching, but every time I go on, there's like millions of coaches on Clubhouse. And to your point, Jessica, that you just said, there are a million coaches out there, but nobody is a coach the way that you would be a coach. And
Yeah.
there are people out there who, there could be the most world renowned coach in the world, but they might not align with them. They might align with you. And that's why it's important. My first business coach said to me, when I was researching and figuring out what I wanted to do or how I wanted to position myself, she said, find people who are doing what you're doing.
Yeah.
Not because you're going to mimic them or copy them, but you want to make sure there are people out there doing what you're doing, and to
Yeah.
some extent,
Hmm.
because that shows that there's a need for it. It shows that there's a desire for it. There are people out there who are looking for it.
Yeah.
And that is, it sounds like conceptual in a sense of what you're talking about. No one's, no one's really doing it the way that you're doing it.
Right.
There might be other things out there, but it's not unique in the style that you're bringing it to the table, and your voice is much different than anybody else's voice.
Yeah. I think that tags in a lot too to, the practice that I had and have as an actor,
Mm-hmm.
because what you have to, I mean, so I'll speak to it in the sense of like, right now I'm doing more TV and film, but when I was doing more theater and when it wasn't the pandemic,
Yeah.
you'd physically walk into a room right? And you'd stand in front of people sitting at a table and you would perform. You would sing, or you would do your monologue, or you would dance. And the line around these buildings of New York City in just this 1 hour, not to mention
Oh,
however many days they were doing auditions and however many submissions they're taking online or whatever. I mean, it was such a mental game,
yeah, I can't
of,
even imagine.
yeah, that you had to kind of just say, like, there's got to be something about you and your essence. And I always liked to say the practice of like bless and release, so I would go in there, I would do my thing. If the people behind the table worked with the energy that I was giving off of, liked the talent that I had, then great. And if not, then great.
Yep.
And I
Yeah.
would just like leave the building that day and move on to my next thing. And I think that's why it was also so important for me to start this podcast, because I had something to focus on that was positive and that was a little bit separate, but
Yeah.
I'm still using, my listening skills and my voice and, able to connect with people, which is what I love doing. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, I think that kind of helped, uh, I don't know, support that mindset a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. The what I hear with that description in your audition process is not being attached to the outcome
Mm-hmm.
of it, but but working through the process that you knew you had somewhat control over. You knew how what felt good for you alignment wise.
Yeah.
And you were not going to be attached to what the outcome of that was, because you knew that if it was if it was the okay, you get the role, you get the part, great, that means everything's aligned and the energy is aligned. If I didn't, it probably wouldn't have worked if I did, you know?
Yeah. And being that in that like honest, grounded, truthful sense of you and who you are too. Cause, it's so funny. You see these, especially young kids right out of high school or right out of college coming to auditions, and they're like, they'll show up and like, hi, like, what do you want me to do for you? They just want to be the puppet, you
Yep.
know? As opposed to you have a 30-year-old walk in there and you're like, hey, what's up? So, okay, this is what I'm singing. All right, great. All right, have a
Yep.
good one.
This is who I am. There's a
Yeah.
little more. Yep.
And I think that's with anything, if you're going to try, if you want to be a coach, or you want to be a, TV host, or you want to be a financial advisor, like there are definitely financial advisors whose energy, if they're themselves, I'm going to vibe with more than someone else. So
Yep.
I think it's that essence of being true to yourself, as cliche as that is, but
Yeah, absolutely. And I like going back a little bit too, when you had said your some of the initial resistance was who is this, who is Jessica to do this podcast when she
yeah.
isn't at this time a mother, and kind of working through your own resistance of that, or the own like your own like what are they gonna say about me, or what are they gonna think about me, and the fact that it sounded like you shifted that mindset into, well, I'm learning and I'm not coming at it. The way in which you're approaching this isn't like I know all of this stuff. It
No.
was just a forum to be able to have other people share what they knew or what their experience was, so that could be shared across the board with so many other women. So
Yep.
you're like the vehicle to get the real honest stories from these women who are moms for the first time into the hands, into the ears of women who have never done this before.
Right. And there's, like I said, there's podcasts dealing with pregnancy and dealing with mothers and everything. And the people who are hosting them are wonderful, but they have their own experience as well. Whereas, like, I am my audience. So I know what I want to know about,
Yep.
Like I just
Yep.
thought today when I was doing an interview this morning, I thought, holy moly, like, how much does having a baby cost? Like, I don't know. And then I
Mm-hmm.
thought, I need to find somebody that I can bring on the show to ask, like, how can you financially prepare, and how much does it cost? And then, what does your insurance cover? So
Yep.
those aren't necessarily things that people who have already been there would think to discuss, but I'm
Right.
curious about it,
Right. And you don't, you just kind of do it. And then when you get whatever the invoice is or the
Right.
bill or whatever the insurance, then you're like, holy shit. Like, but then
Right.
you're left with it and you have to deal with it. So having that knowledge beforehand, how helpful would that be?
Mm-hmm.
That would be, at the time that I was pregnant with my daughter, she's going to be 10 in October. She's 9 now. I remember I was working at the time. One of the things I was doing was I was a school social worker, and one of the teachers that I worked with in the middle school was she was amazing, just this open, honest. She's like, she had her kids. She's like, I'm going to tell you, if you're ready to hear it, I'm going to tell you what you need to hear. I'm not going to tell you the BS. Like, what I'm going to tell you what happens after you have the baby. I'm going to tell you the gross
Yep.
stuff. Like, I'm
Yep.
telling you. And and we would be like in stitches on the floor laughing hysterically. But let me tell you something, every last detail that she described, which we were all like, oh my, like none of us were, we were all like hysterical because we were like,
Yeah.
oh, this is going to be, she's like, you're going to be in that room. And like, if you're the most modest person, the janitor's going to come in, mop, and you're not going to care, but you're going to be like, come on in,
Right.
everyone come in. I don't care who sees me. And,
Right.
and when the person's like, all the details. Right.
Yeah.
And let me tell you, when all of those things happen, not the person never came in, like, never came in, but all of those other things, I'm like, oh my gosh, Diana totally prepped me for this. Diana
Right.
told me this was going to happen. I'm so glad, because I would have been like, what the fuck is going on here?
Right.
But I was prepared for that in a roundabout way. And to the point of your podcast, like it's an incredible information that those books are not going to tell you.
Well, and I think too, it's giving women the ability to know their options, you
Yes.
know? And I think, childbirth is something that's been done from the beginning of time. So we're
Correct.
just kind of assumed to figure it out and to do it and to come out looking fabulous in the end.
Ugh,
And it's not that way.
no.
And we have to know, like I was just speaking with a friend the other day about when she went in to have her daughter, and she was describing how, first of all, like the nurse was with her the whole time. The doctor didn't even come until the last minute, which is
Mm-hmm.
important to know.
Yep,
But
that is
she's
true.
saying, the nurse was just saying, like, okay, so this is what you're going to do. You're going to grab onto your legs, you're going to inhale, and you're just going to push really hard like you're going to poop. And I was telling her, like, well, what about purple pushing? Like, have you heard about purple pushing? Where purple pushing is like, you, for those who are watching and don't know, where you hold your breath and your face goes purple. That's why. So
Mm-hmm.
instead you're going like, and you're
Mm-hmm.
pushing down really hard. But so that's what they're encouraging you to do. But that's not good for you. That's not healthy for you.
Right.
And she was saying, like, well, I didn't even feel like I could say, no, that's not how I want to do it.
Right.
But like, warning, like, it's
Yep.
okay. You do this work beforehand to tell that nurse, thanks for the advice, but actually I'm going to do it this way that
Yep.
I learned about and that I trained. And listen, it's a business for them. They do this
Correct.
all day, every day. But
Right.
this is the only 1, 2, 3, maybe hopefully some people more, 8, 10
Right.
times that you're going to do it in your life.
Yep.
And you're the
True.
one that has to go home with the repercussions of what happened. So anyway, my point in saying that is just like, it giving women the option to know what they can do and what they don't have to do, and to stand
Right.
up for themselves.
Right.
Because that's been the biggest lesson that I've learned throughout doing this podcast. We have so much more advocacy that we can do for ourselves
Yeah.
as a woman. And, you know, you might be told how your baby is growing in size by a book that you read or an app that you follow, but you're not necessarily going to be encouraged to say, no, thank you. I don't want this. This is how I'm going to do it. Or
Right.
I don't want to lay on my back to give birth. I want to be
Right.
in the side lying position. Like,
Right.
you got to say, anyway, I could go on forever.
But I think that point, you have to, being able to own and recognize your voice and get to a point, whether you have to practice it, whether you have to, whatever it is that you have to do, but know that your voice is valuable and that you are worthy and deserving of having that experience the way in which you want to have it. And I think that is so validating. That's what people need to remember and align with, as things are going smoothly and you're able to do that, you're able to do that. You don't have to necessarily take what people are saying, you can try it your way, and you certainly should. Because I love how you put that. And I never really thought about that concept. I mean, of course, having the nurses go through hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of births as part of their career. We don't do that as women. We don't have hundreds of births. We have a handful. Maybe we have one, maybe we have two, however many we have. We need to have the experience, because that is a life-changing, memorable experience that you're having. And it
Yeah.
should be what feels okay to you.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, that just goes for anything, not even when talking
Yep.
about,
Yeah.
childbirth and motherhood, but like, I just think that women too often, which is why I love what you're doing, it's like we have this typical path. We have this like, expectation that we have to
Yes.
hold everything up and not have it be hard. And I just think that it's just not true. And
Yeah.
I'm a sucker for it. Like, I hold on way too much without communicating to my husband what is actually going on up here. I
Yeah.
keep that to-do
Yeah.
list running.
Yep.
Um, but I think just more conversations like this help to empower women,
Yes.
and just, start to have the conversation about it, and hopefully change little tidbits here and there.
Absolutely. And even if, even in that empowering space, if you've checked all the boxes of what you're supposed to do in life, whatever that means, it doesn't mean that what you started doing in your life, that doesn't have to be the way it is all the time. You can have shifts, you can have moments, you can have pivots where maybe when you started, just, I'm speaking on the traditional, in the traditional space here, maybe when you started and you got that career, in your mind's eye, or what your parents did before you was, you get the career and you work until you retire, and then you live your life, and then you have the fun, and then you do what you're supposed to do. But that doesn't have to be the end all be all. Certainly
Right.
that's okay. If that's your thing, that is okay. It's
Yeah.
okay for people to be in that space. But if there's something else that's calling you, or something else that is that kind of keeps showing up, or you're thinking about doing something else, it doesn't mean that you can't do it because you're supposed to stay on this path. You're supposed to, and that's, I think, what makes me so brokenhearted over a lot of women in particular, that if I jump off this path, or if I pour into this, and what if I don't succeed, or what if someone looks at me funny, or what if I have those, as we were talking about a little bit, those impostery syndromes, or who am I to do this, or everyone else is doing this, this would be ridiculous if I started to do this. I think that getting out of our own way, and getting out of our own heads, and listening to what's going on in here, and stop listening to what's going on up here, because there are so many reasons why we tell ourselves we shouldn't do things, but there are many more reasons why we should.
Absolutely. Yeah. I was just having a conversation last night. Once a month, I host this little group of like 6 of us girls, and we just get together, and it's called Victories Group,
Oh, I
because,
love it.
yeah, I was feeling a lot of negativity. It's like with my work and the career of acting and everything. It was just like a lot of people I was around was just negative, negative, negative. So I said, well, I want a space where we kind of get together once a month, and we just talk about what we've done that's been a victory.
Love it.
And of course, we have emotional moments. And last night we were all like sobbing multiple times,
Oh,
but it's a good kind of focus. So anyway, my point is that even last night, one of the girls was saying, especially with this career as an actor, or as a creative, or even as an entrepreneur, there's this mindset of hustle. It's
yeah.
like
Oh,
you
I hate
have,
that word.
yes, it's like you have to hustle. You have, like, it has to be hard. As an actor, you need to have 15 jobs, which I've always had. And just last night, we were saying how, like, you don't have to have that definition, you know?
Right.
If you don't want to have it, you don't have to have it.
Right.
And that was just a little bit, I was like, oh, okay, I get it. I get it. Because I've had a couple things on my mind recently with that. And I think, yeah, it's that same concept. We get into like what it should be or what's typical. And yeah, it doesn't need to be that way.
No, it doesn't. And that idea of hustle, right? No matter what we're doing in our life, I think that's such a buzzword. that we see around all of the time. And I think it's almost, it's over glorified. And I don't think it's the reality, because when it just might be because the way my brain works as a psychotherapist too, is when I hear the word hustle, the word that I correlate that to is burnout. And if I'm pushing and pushing and pushing myself constantly, then where does that leave me? How am I connecting to my energy? How am I letting myself get re-energized or get recharged? How am I allowing myself to slow down and just have those moments of quiet? Because that's so important too. You know, I think that's a misperceived word oftentimes, because, and a lot of times when people think about getting into a different space or getting into a different place, they're like, I'm going to have to work twice as hard because now I have this other thing that I'm doing most of my day. Now I'm going to have to add this other thing, and I'm going to have to work twice as hard to do this other thing. And I don't have the energy for that. But that's not how it has to be.
No,
you know,
not at all.
you could do the other, if you had something else that you've been thinking about doing or wanting to do or wanting to connect with or wanting to explore, if you took a half an hour and created a half an hour of space for yourself, it doesn't have to be every day, maybe more days out of the week than not, and you just started to take dip your toes into it, that could be enough to get yourself started. It doesn't have to be, I'm working 8 hours a day, now I have to add another 8 hours on to figure this other thing out. That's not how it has to be at all.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
I completely agree. It's a tricky, like, I think for me, the biggest thing was my career as an actor. It's difficult because people always want to know what they can see you in, what's coming up next. And you don't necessarily always have an answer. Like I mentioned at the beginning of this episode, like even the biggest celebrities don't necessarily have an answer. Because ideally, they're hopefully in maybe like a handful of movies a year, and then that's it,
Yep.
So they don't necessarily, we don't necessarily have something coming up or something to look forward to. And I think for me, that's what I needed. I needed something that it's like I could answer that question with, that I was equally as passionate and excited about. And I think that goes for anybody in any situation, like you can have what I like to call like a job,
Yeah.
but if you don't have something else, to kind of talk about. And I think unfortunately in the States, so my husband's from Puerto Rico, and it's crazy because when you go to Puerto Rico, we can go and like not go for a while and see people, and no one ever asks about our job. No one
I love
ever
that.
asks, what do you do or how's work or anything. You meet people here in the States, and I mean, Puerto Rico's part of the United States, but states.
Yeah.
And they say, what do you do?
Yeah.
Oh,
That's one of the first questions that comes
nice
up when you're getting to know somebody.
Yeah. What do you do?
Mm-hmm.
And over there, they just want to know what you're going to drink, what music you want to listen to, what
I
you
love
might
it.
want to eat next, And I think that's, for me, that was key, because while I'm super passionate about being an actor, I needed something else to talk about that I was so excited about. And I think that goes for anybody in any situation. Like if you're a mom with a job, you might not want to talk about your job, and you might not want to talk about mom life.
That's right.
Maybe you also are, an artist, and you paint twice a week, or maybe you have a meditation practice that you do, those are the things that you can talk about, because those are the things that like make you you
Yep.
know
Yeah.
so
Yeah. That's so true. The things that light you up, right?
right.
And that whole, and the point too about how in this space, in your acting space, if there are moments where there might not be something active happening, that it sounds like almost that feeling of I have to have a filler, I have to say something.
Yeah, you go to that Thanksgiving dinner and people say, what's going on, and you don't have a show lined up, or you don't have, a project lined up. You're SOL,
Right. And that whole piece of things, I think, with the whole idea of whether it's people creating a new business or a passion project, whatever that is, when people do ask you about it, I think a lot of times that one of the blockers that gets in the way is how am I going to tell, like, what am I going to say to other people about what I do? Or how are other people going to understand what I do? Or what if people don't get what I do? Or what if I start this business and it takes, in reality, a while for it to get to where I want it to be.
Yeah.
And people are like, well, okay, well, you have this going on, but how successful is this really going for you?
Mm-hmm.
And that whole concept of what is my next, what am I going to say to that? How am I going to respond to that? And I think that's what deters a lot of people from stepping into something new too, is that whole concept of what others are going to think or how others are going to perceive me. And that's, I think it's definitely a reality, but being able to say, well, if that weren't the case, like, what is it lighting up inside of you when you do think about it? Why do you keep thinking about it? Why do you keep getting different validations from everywhere you turn that this is something that keeps coming up in your life? Like, what is that about? And that should be more of a driving force than that.
Totally. Yeah. I've been really trying to not be the person that I tend to do it, but I'm really trying hard to not be the person that asks that question of what do you do, or, what's going on. But I think it would be interesting if we shifted it a little bit. If someone were to ask you that question, you were to say, like, I did an awesome workout today. Last week, I made this delicious recipe. It's with this and this. I could send it to you if you want. And then I went on a walk to the park, and I got a coffee at my favorite coffee shop, and yeah, it was a good week. And like, that's what your response is, as opposed to, like, I pushed a lot of papers and I sat at my desk.
Right. I saw these clients, or I got the promotion, or I landed three shows, or whatever, instead of that, saying, what is like like you said, when you go to Puerto Rico, and visit with your husband, it's that whole concept. It sounds like the cultural mentality is, let's live in the moment. And let's celebrate the things that are happening right now,
and each other
and life. And what a great framework to go off of. And I love that concept of, let's not, when we meet somebody for the first time, try to think of something else to ask other than, what do you do? Or when you see somebody you haven't seen in a long time, how was work today? How is it, how was that today? How was, and I think that might be a really good thing for everybody, for our listeners to even consider. Like, what if we shifted that one thing?
Yeah.
And just see.
Yeah. And then I think the other, like, circling it back to the audience that I'm often talking to with moms and mamas in training, is the opposite side to that is, we need to shift the question to new moms, asking them how they are.
Yes.
And
not, how's the baby?
Right. I mean, you go through all of the pregnancy time wondering about the mom. How are you? How are you feeling? And then the baby's here, and it's all about the baby, which is amazing. And like, we love babies. That's why I do this, because I love babies. But very rarely do we genuinely ask. Like, I always, whenever I ask my friends who have recently have a kid, I usually say, like, how are you? Like, like really.
Like, really, and you really mean it.
How are you?
Really?
Yep. And I say it multiple times, because they're often
like, no, but
say
how
it.
are you?
Yeah. Because they're often going to say at first, like, oh, I'm good. I'm tired and a little sore. I'm like, no. Like, wait a minute. Ask again. So I think that's kind of the other side of it. It's like, at that point for moms, the job, the job is the baby, so instead of asking about that, you can ask about them and what you can do to offer help or support.
Yeah. Absolutely. And that even being so direct, that you even keep asking the question, and so that they really do answer it authentically and truthfully. And I think, you mentioned the word support. I think even whether it's new moms or people who are struggling, whatever it is, asking, instead of, people are, how people often say, and I think this is good human quality, and sometimes we don't know what else to say. People might say, I'm here for you. Anything you need, just ask. I'm here for you. Maybe instead of saying something like that, say, what is it that I can do right now to support you? Give me something that I can support you with right now. What is it that you need? Do you need a meal? Do you need me to, whatever, to run to the store for you? What is it that you need from me right now? How can I support you? Because I think that question goes such a long way and is seen so differently.
100%.
and felt differently. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think women aren't, we're less likely to, we'll say, okay, great, thanks. But like, we're never going to reach out to you. Like if we reach out to anybody, maybe it's going to be like our mom and our in-laws or our like closest aunt, but like,
Yeah,
we're really not going to reach out to you. So I think that's key, what
absolutely.
do you, and just straight up asking, like, do you need your house cleaned? I'll send over a housekeeper.
Hmm.
Do you need, a certain meal? I'll send it to you. Do
Yeah.
you, what are those things?
Yeah.
Do you need me to come and just hold your baby so you can sleep? Like those are
Yep.
yeah, I think that's so, so key. And then I think the flip side of that too is us as women and as mothers and future mothers, we need to be honest, you
That,
know,
yep.
and
Yep.
we need to say like, you know what? Yeah. And I said earlier, like one of the biggest lessons that I've learned is to advocate for yourself. And I'd say the second biggest lesson that I've learned is to ask for help and create your
Yes.
team, have your
Yes.
community, have your team.
Yep.
And it's okay. Like you are stronger together.
Yeah,
You don't
absolutely.
have to, quote unquote, have it all together. And I think you look stronger when you say, yeah, you know what? I've actually really been wanting this recipe. So I'm going to text it to you. And if you can have someone send it or make it for me, or you can make it, that would be awesome.
Yeah.
Like you don't have to say, like, oh, make whatever you want. If you don't want the baked ziti,
Right. This is what I want, or this is the restaurant I want you to order from, or this is the,
exactly.
this is the brand of whatever. Absolutely. Be very specific, because
Yeah.
there's nothing wrong with that. And on the receiving end, when you're asking someone, when someone's asking you how they can support and you're answering, I know that if someone is very direct with me, that's going to make life easier for me too, as the
Oh,
person
yeah.
who's giving. I'll know exactly what they want. I know that they're going to like it, they're going to enjoy it, and it's going to make their life so much easier. And they're not going to have to say or pretend that they like it if it's not something that aligns with them.
Exactly.
And I think that whole concept of, as women, lowering that expectation that we have to juggle and handle it all, and that we can actually farm things out, ask for help, delegate. And I think that comes with everything. So even if it's I want to figure out what's next for me, or I want to figure out how to pick up that hobby that I lost along the way, or I want to figure out what I want, there's a process that you should go through to get really clear about what you want. But sometimes we don't even know how to do that, and we shouldn't expect ourselves to have to know how to do that. And that shouldn't be a reason why you don't do that, because there are people out there who can assist you in strategies and steps to get you to that point where you don't have to feel alone in this. I want to do this, but I don't know how to get started. Okay, great. Well, if you purchased a new television and you didn't know how to work it, you would read a manual, you'd watch a YouTube video, you'd call somebody to hook it up for you. You wouldn't, maybe you'd try it yourself a little bit, but then when it didn't work, you would get somebody in there to assist you. So it's like, it's no different. There's no shame in connecting and aligning with people who can support you to that next stage, no matter what stage that is.
And you never know what connections people have or what capacity people have. And I think it's important to, I had a really, heard a really interesting conversation with some of the gals on Clubhouse the other day, especially in speaking to women in general, I think it should be, but specifically moms.
Mm-hmm.
And kind of saying ahead of time, like say you're going through something and you need an ear, instead of just, calling up a friend and saying like word vomiting everything that's going on, saying like, checking in to see if you have the mental capacity for this. I have something that
Yes.
I
Oh my
need,
God.
that I'm like going through. And like, if you don't, so that's so okay. I'll find another person. But like, I just, need to check. I
Yeah,
think that's really empowering, and it'll make your relationships stronger in that way too, I think.
I agree too. I
Yeah.
agree with that's amazing advice too. And I think it goes both ways, right? So if I'm struggling with something and I'm reaching out to this friend, and I'm truly honestly saying to them, please let me know if you're in a place where you can hear this or
Listen or
handle
help
this
or
or
hear,
listen
right.
or help. And if you're not, no harm, no foul. I'd rather
Right.
you be honest with me. It also gives that other person permission to say no
Right.
if they truly can, and not feel guilt ridden to say yes if they're at their breaking point too. So it helps somebody practice saying no, which is so hard to do as women. And it also helps somebody be really mindful of somebody else's capacity at the same time. There's a
Yeah.
win-win there for sure.
Completely. Yeah. And I think so often it's like we just say yes, me too. My therapist says no is a complete sentence.
Yes, it is.
So I think she gave me a couple tactical things, which I'll share, and it's really helpful. It's like, first, when you're asked of something, first you say no,
Mm-hmm.
then you figure out to what capacity you are able to help or provide, or what the next step is for this. Then you address what that capacity is. So,
Mm-hmm.
no, unfortunately, I can't help you with this, but I can pass you along to someone who might. Or, no, I can't do this at this time, but if you circle back in 6 months, like maybe we can do that.
Mm-hmm.
What are you willing to do?
Yep.
And I think that's really helpful because we are saying no, but we're still being of service, which I know women like to
Yeah.
do so much,
Right.
and you
Right.
never know too. Like if you're looking on the flip side, like you said, with asking for help, you never know what people are going to be able to do or what connections they have. Like I'm in a podcast accelerator program right now with an amazing group of people. And this one woman just asked the other day, "Hey, I'm looking to connect with this person, just throwing it out there if anyone knows anybody." And this one person's like, "Yeah, I know that person's assistant." I'm like,
Oh my God. Amazing.
and so I think that's it too. Like, we don't have to, I'm like file saving, Jessica, remember this. We don't have to like struggle, and climb
Right.
that rope all by
That's right.
yourself. You can ask like within those guidelines too.
Absolutely. Because you never know who is going to say what they're going to say. And
Yep.
I like that advice about saying no, and offering something else,
Yeah.
offering, it's not just a hard no, it's here's how I can help, or here's when I might be available, or here's a person who might be able to help you with that. As an add-on to that, I also love the concept of um, when somebody asks something of me, and I give this advice to clients too, when somebody asks something of me and I'm in a position where I'm starting to feel less guilty about saying no about things, I will advise people, and I do this myself, not to answer them right away, even if you're a hard yes,
Oh my
even if
gosh.
you're a hard no, because what that does is it gives you practice. Okay, oh, thank you for asking me. Give me a minute. I'm gonna get back to you. Take a pause, even if you know the answer is going to be yes, or even if, because then you're allowing yourself the space to not feel the pressure to answer right away, and then you get back to them. And then, or if you're in a place where you feel like you might say yes because of the guilt, you have more time to process really if I say yes, what's going to happen. Maybe I don't really want to say yes. Maybe I want to say no. Maybe it's my guilt talking. You have a little more time to process before you give the answer.
100%. Yeah,
Yeah.
you're speaking right toward me. And that was something that I was talking to my therapist a couple weeks ago about too, is like, I'm so, as like an empath, as somebody who
Yep.
likes to help people,
Yep.
it's like I just want to be of service. I just want to help everybody. I just want to do everything. And so I'm
Yep.
so quick to, whoop, can you do this? Whoop, are you free here? Whoop. And like, yeah, yeah. And it's just like, let me check my calendar.
Yeah.
Just give me a
Yeah.
couple
Even
minutes.
if
Let me get back to you.
even if
Yep.
it's going to be, and I am the same exact way. And, up until I started practicing this myself a couple of years ago, I have a friend, a very close friend, who from the beginning of our friendship, whenever I would ask her something, she would never give me an answer right away. She always, and I don't, and to this day, I should ask her, but to this day, I don't know. I think that's just who she was, but she would never give me an answer right away. And sometimes I'd be like, why can't you just freaking say it? Like,
Yeah.
what's wrong with her? But now that I look back on this,
You're like,
I no longer get frustrated with her, because no matter the reason why she's doing it, it's her right to do that. and how great that she is giving herself that pause, whether it's for
Totally.
whatever reason. I think I really do value that, and I understand why she might be doing that, you know?
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, this is
Suzanne, I
awesome.
feel like all these nuggets, like we could write a book about what we just talked about, right?
We need to do,
Oh,
well, it's all recorded, so we
there
can
you
definitely go
go.
back and dissect it, or
I
maybe
love
do
it.
add-ons or other episodes connected
Yeah,
to some
yeah,
of these topics, because there were a lot of amazing topics here that we
yeah.
discussed. Yeah. So Jessica, what are some final thoughts? So people who are listening right now and they're aligning with some of the things you're saying, or they're like, maybe I want to get on her podcast, and maybe I have some gems I could drop from experience being a mom, or maybe I'm not a mom yet and I want to align with her podcast. Any thoughts, words of encouragement, or or I want you to share how people can find you and get in touch with you. We're always going to drop all of your links that you shared with us below this on the YouTube channel. They're going to be able to click on the links, but I always like people to say them out loud too.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Well, I'll start with that just so I don't forget. And basically, for the podcast, it's everywhere, just Mamas in Training. Actually, lied a little bit. Instagram is Mamas in Training Pod, POD.
Okay.
So Mamas in Training Pod on Instagram, and then mamasintraining.com. You can look pretty much on anywhere that you would get your podcast, Mamas in Training. It's there. And like I said, if you go back in the history, you might see some pumping podcast references, but it's all me. It's all the same. And then if you're looking to just connect with me, you can find me at jessicalorion.com. That's sort of my overall professional acting and host website there, and then Jessica Lorion on Instagram as well. I also, if there is anybody who's an aspiring mom or a pregnant woman, I have a Facebook group called Mamas in Training, and everyone's welcome to join that. I'm looking to create a very comfortable, supportive, positive environment there. So you're welcome to jump over on Facebook and support there. But I mean, I think I think the biggest thing that I guess I'd just love to, it's so crazy. My mind is going in a million places. And I think part of
I
that
can
is,
see it happening.
yeah, right. I think part of that is because I'm thinking back to one of your first questions, which was like, who am I to, do whatever I'm doing? And this comes up as, for me personally, this comes up as an actor. This comes up for me as a podcast host. This comes up for me when beautiful people like yourself ask to talk to me. And it's like, who would want to hear what I have to say? And I just think that if women embraced and embodied the stories that they have,
Yeah.
that more change could happen. And you don't have to have certain titles, you don't have to
Right.
have certain followers, you don't have to have,
Right.
you just have to have an open heart, an honest and truthful story,
Yep.
and the desire to share and give back and connect.
Yep.
And for me, I mean, whether you want to be a listener of the podcast, whether you want to be a guest on the podcast, whether you only listened to this today and we never connect in the future, whether you message me and DM me or email me and we become best friends, like whatever it is, I'm just grateful that I was given time. And I think time is such a commodity these days because we
Yeah.
go on apps and we just flip, 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 flip. So
Yep.
if you can take 20 seconds or more of someone's time, it's a privilege. So
Yeah.
I'm just so grateful for that. And I think if more of us just, you know, this app that we met on Clubhouse, I think the wonderful thing about it is it gives everybody a voice.
Yep.
And everybody gets a time to speak, no matter if they have a disability, no matter what they look like, if they speak, and even there are people who don't speak perfectly.
Yep.
There's unbelievable women on there that I've met who are deaf, and so their speech is impaired, but they still have a voice on this app.
100%.
And so I think that's it too. I think women in general need to really embrace their voice. Aspiring moms and pregnant women need to embrace their voice, new moms need to embrace their voice and ask for what they want and need.
Yep.
And I just think if we all kind of did this some more, it would be, you know, there would just be it's so like crunchy, but there'd be like some more harmony, there'd be we'd all
Yeah.
be able to lift each other up a little bit more. And my story with my autoimmune disease is something that really it wasn't until I'd say like during this pandemic that I kind of realized like that is what I need to be sharing. That's why this whole podcast relaunch has to happen, because
Yeah.
that's why I'm doing what I'm doing. You know what I
Right.
mean? And even if you're someone who's lost a child, or you are having trouble with fertility, like we mentioned earlier, like we need to get that out there and we need to
Yep.
talk and share. So I thank you for this platform, and I
Of course.
encourage women out there to listen and support one another. And then also, if you have a story, get it out there and share it, even if it's not something that you're doing like a podcast or whatever,
Yeah.
or a YouTube channel. Just get your story out there, and you never know who it can touch. So yeah, I'm just grateful to have shared my story and to have been here. And with that having said, if anybody would like to connect or contact me, you definitely can on any of the ways that I mentioned. And it might take me a couple days in my DMs, but I'll get back to you eventually. Suzanne and I were playing tag for a while and we got each
Absolutely.
other. So
We did. Those DMs do get a little filled, but that's
yeah,
okay, because we are people, and we
yeah,
respond and we
totally.
value the response. So I appreciate all of that, Jessica, and you sharing your story and you being here and sharing all that you have. I know, as we kind of laughed about before, there were so many gem droppers here that we kind of have to go
Yeah,
back and
I
dissect and
love it.
maybe kind of work through some of those and maybe even create a little more connected to some of the things that we discussed, because it's
Yeah,
all super important. So appreciate your time and your space and your energy for
same.
being here and making this amazing interview happen. And as we said before, all the links will be dropped below. So definitely go ahead and click on them. And if you guys are in a place where you're like, I want to get forward moving on something too, you can always schedule a discovery call with me so we can figure out what might be next for you as well. So you don't have to go it by yourself or alone. And as I always say to close out, just because you've done everything in life that you're supposed to do does not mean that you've done everything that you're meant to do. And appreciate everybody listening, hanging out. If you found value in this podcast, and it's a YouTube channel, but
Yeah.
if you found value in this interview, definitely like it, share it, and cut and paste the links, share it with anybody you want to share it with. Throw a comment below, and definitely subscribe to the channel for more amazing interviews like this one today.
Awesome.
Thank you, everybody, for hanging out.
Thank you, Suzanne.
Bye. You're welcome. Bye.